Greetings, everyone. This evening, we're diving into ancient Greek celebrations. And rest assured, this won't be a serene gathering of sages gently swirling their drinks and exchanging courteous nods. So, before you settle in, please take a quick moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly appreciate the content I create. Also, drop a comment to tell me your location and current time. I'm always intrigued to learn about our global audience. Now, lower the lights and let's gently slip into this evening's adventure. You're not heading to a typical party filled with happiness, impulsiveness, and the option to exit early without any social awkwardness. What you're attending is a symposium, a term loaded with gravity. The ancient Greeks masterfully concealed the reality that a bunch of adult males intended to consume wine until their voices overpowered their logic. The invite was crafted with care. No mention of booze. Instead, it highlighted exchanging ideas, camaraderie, and maybe even virtue. That's your clue that wine is on the menu. But don't expect any food you've already dined elsewhere, since dinner is just the opener. The symposium is designed for everyone to concentrate on the true objective, testing how many philosophical convictions endure after extended wine consumption. You show up at the residence feigning interest in intellectual enrichment. This is a courteous deception, and nobody exposes you because they're all deceiving as well. You're supposed to contribute sparingly. Staying quiet raises suspicion. Silence indicates either pride or being sober. Both are unwelcome. A helper takes off your shoes. It seems ritualistic until you understand it's primarily to stop you from sliding on the floor later. The space features couches positioned along the walls. Using chairs would suggest proper posture. Posture indicates discipline. Discipline spoils the fun. You lie back, trying to seem at ease, which is tough because the human anatomy isn't built for horizontal philosophizing. You look around and see everyone else faking comfort, and you willingly partake in this collective fantasy. Your back will lodge an official protest the next day. The dim illumination isn't for ambience, it's to obscure everyone's facial reactions. As inhibitions start to fade, the room vibrates with subtle expectation. It's the noise of individuals about to grow highly certain about matters they barely grasp. You convince yourself this event will remain orderly. Intellectual dialogue, controlled drinking, sensible outcomes. You pledge this just as people swear they'll only have a single glass. Then the wine appears. It's diluted with water, since the Greeks had many traits, but self-destructive wasn't among them. You acknowledge the mixture approvingly, though you'll completely disregard it shortly. The symposium is now in session. Currently, logic remains, but it will vanish quickly once the drinking commences. The event exposes its real intention, not seeking truth, but evaluating how assertively incorrect someone can be while lying down. You're about to engage wholeheartedly the second you step into the room. You're required to recline straight away, not after a courteous delay, but instantly. Remaining upright for too long indicates doubt, and doubt is out of style at a symposium. No chairs exist, and that's deliberate. Chairs represent order, and order suggests boundaries. Boundaries are the adversary of whatever this night will turn into. You pick a couch and lie back, attempting to appear effortless, but it's far from effortless. The human form wasn't engineered to dine, sip, gesture, and debate ethics while propped on a single elbow like a swooning noble. Yet everyone else does it, so you go all in. Half-hearted reclining is even worse and highly embarrassing. Your left arm loses feeling within seconds, but you disregard it. Voicing discomfort would imply vulnerability, and vulnerability attracts philosophical barbs. You shift a bit, which only exacerbates the situation. By now, you concede that blood flow is a luxury and self-respect has vanished. Lying down isn't for ease. It's for uniformity. When all participants are horizontal, nobody dominates by height. Hierarchy is leveled, and authority shifts to dialogue. Additionally, it's simpler to knock over wine without needing to get up to correct it. The sofas are placed against the walls. Forming a circle of individuals gazing inward guarantees ample eye contact. There's no way to lurk in the rear. Every statement you make will be observed, recalled, and potentially cited against you later, inaccurately, yet assertively. Attendants glide silently across the room, stepping past footwear and dodging elbows. You appreciate their expertise. They've performed this routine repeatedly. They can already predict which attendees will grow insufferable. Initially, as you get comfortable, you detect a quiet rivalry. Who appears the most at ease? Who can lounge as if it's their inherent posture? Who seems like they were born debating while horizontal? You try to equal their composure, but you fall short, and nobody remarks. They're occupied with crafting their own acts. Reclining theoretically reduces drinking pace, but practically it simplifies refilling since cups are already tilted. You grip your cup cautiously, promising yourself you'll take small sips. That resolve endures for roughly one discussion. At this point, all participants remain fairly lucid. Tones are even, chuckles are controlled, views are expressed courteously. This is the deceptive stage, the segment of the night everyone recalls with warmth, despite only persisting around 10 minutes. You're now lying down, numb, and fully invested. The symposium is genuinely underway. The wine appears earlier than desired and more swiftly than you anticipated. It's brought in with ritual, dispensed from a sizable shared vessel, and handled with a reverence typically afforded to sacred items. This ought to be your initial alert. You're informed courteously, with assurance. The fact that the wine is diluted with water is intended to comfort you, though it shouldn't. Ancient Greek wine differs from contemporary wine. It's more viscous, deeper in color, and potent enough that consuming it undiluted would transform the symposium into a public hazard. Watering down isn't about temperance. It's about endurance. You cautiously take your first taste. The flavor is acidic, earthy, and a little insulted by your wariness. You nod approvingly, as if you are a wine connoisseur. Everyone else does the same. This is a gathering of men feigning expertise. The proportion, you soon grasp, is bold but not reckless, confident that the host wants conversation to flow. He craves viewpoints, debates, a state where everyone is sufficiently intoxicated to be candid, yet sufficiently clear to express themselves imperfectly. You promise yourself to moderate your intake. This notion is typical at symposia, and almost always the final rational decision of the night. You take measured sips, observing the initial discussions, superficial subjects, uncontroversial notions, mild jesting, all are still enacting decorum. Then someone refills your cup. You did not request it, it simply occurs without warning. The cup is never empty long enough to feel lonely. You consider declining the refill, but that could suggest arrogance or weakness, so you accept graciously while mentally recalculating how much control remains. As the wine takes effect, you feel warmer, looser, more eloquent. You begin to believe your thoughts are clearer than usual. This perception is mistaken, yet the confidence is persuasive. You talk a bit more, your gestures broaden, and your voice carries authority, as if each sentence deserves attention. The same transformation happens around the room. Laughter grows louder, interruptions multiply, agreements become enthusiastic, and disagreements become personal. The wine is doing exactly what it was meant to do. You glance at the communal bowl and realize it is already lower than it should be. A joke is made about it, and someone else refills your cup again. You stop counting. At this point, the gathering crosses an invisible threshold. No one announces it, no one acknowledges it, but everyone feels it. The night is no longer guided by reason. The wine has taken over politely, efficiently, and with full consent, and you are completely sure this is going very well. Eventually, someone decides the evening needs structure. This is endearing. In an effort to preserve balance, moderation, and the illusion of control, a symposiarch is appointed. This person is responsible for regulating the wine, setting the pace, and preventing the symposium from becoming a philosophical disaster. This person is chosen either because they are respected, intimidating, or sitting closest to the bowl. None of these qualities will matter. The symposiarch announces the rules. He speaks confidently, as if authority still functions in this room. He explains the ratio of wine to water and the timing of refills, and the importance of not drinking too much too fast. Everyone nods. These nods mean nothing. They are ceremonial, like the kind given before ignoring instructions entirely. For about 5 minutes, the system works. Cups are filled carefully. Refills are spaced out. People pretend restraint is a shared value. You even believe this might succeed. Then someone laughs too hard. Then someone else refills their cup without asking. Then the symposiarch refills his own cup, which is not a great look for leadership. You watch his authority quietly dissolve as guests begin topping off their wine whenever a servant walks by. No one challenges him directly. That would be rude. Instead, everyone simply behaves as if the rules are suggestions, like people treat speed limits on empty roads. The symposiarch attempts to reassert control, clears his throat, and comments on moderation. Someone responds with a joke. The room laughs. The moment is gone. From now on, the symposium will run on momentum. You notice that cups are no longer emptied before refilling. This is an important development. Wine is now stacking, conversations overlap, and the room grows louder. The symposiarch gives up and reclines deeper into his couch, accepting his fate. This is not failure. This is tradition. The role of symposiarch exists not to maintain order, but to give the evening a brief head start before chaos. It provides structure the way a thin rope provides structure to a landslide. You stop paying attention to who is in charge. No one is. The wine decides now, and strangely, this feels correct. The symposium is no longer pretending to be governed. It has reached its natural state. A room full of confident voices, loosened minds, and cups that are never empty long enough to cool. Responsibility had its moment, and it passed quietly without protest. Once responsibility has officially left the room, entertainment arrives. This is meant to elevate the evening. It does not. It does, however, make it louder. Someone brings out a lyre. This person believes they are talented. No one challenges this belief because the wine has reached the point where disagreement feels like unnecessary effort. The first notes are plucked, and you nod appreciatively, even though you cannot tell whether the instrument is being tuned or slowly threatened. Music at a symposium is not background noise. It demands attention. You are expected to listen, react, and look emotionally moved. So you do. You tilt your head slightly. You close your eyes for a moment. You make a thoughtful face that says, yes, this is culture. Even though what you are actually thinking is, this sounds better from further away. Then comes singing, and someone begins reciting poetry. Another joins in, but the rhythm is questionable. The volume is ambitious, and the confidence is unmatched. You clap politely at the end, because that is what civilized people do when they are unsure whether something has gone wrong. The musician, encouraged by the applause, continues. At this point, you realize the purpose of the music is not enjoyment. It is participation. It occupies the space, banishes quietness, and offers a simple point of consensus everyone can accept without deep thought. You convince yourself that this beats endless arguing. That might be false, yet it brings solace. As the wine spreads its influence throughout the gathering, the music becomes more daring, and a rhythmic tapping begins from somewhere. A different person hums off-key, then another tries to fix the tune, only to worsen the sound. Remarkably, the lyra musician gracefully tolerates these interferences. You find yourself gently rocking, not from musical appreciation, but because your equilibrium has been compromised by reclining and consuming wine. You reassure yourself that this motion appears normal. With skilled detachment, the staff navigate the turmoil. They've witnessed this scene repeatedly and know its conclusion, topping up goblets as they dodge animated movements and perilous elbows. At this stage, the music has ceased being performance. It's become mere background, merging with the laughter, chatter, and wine droplets landing perilously near the ground. You keep nodding, applauding, and feigning that this evening matches your expectations. Yet in a deep corner of your consciousness, you grasp a crucial truth. This is merely the start. The earlier music has dulled critical thinking, and the wine has made you believe your reflexes are flawless. When someone proposes games, that marks the decisive shift. Now the evening abandons its cultural facade and turns into a contest over unnecessary demonstrations. The games are deceptively simple, which is their peril. One challenge requires flicking wine from your goblet at a target typically a modest bowl positioned across the room. The instructions are delivered hastily and with little clarity. Precision earns admiration while any mess is overlooked. You join in because refusal would signal timidity or, even worse, full consciousness. You attempt a flick but miss, and wine scatters across the floor. Nobody minds. Indeed, a person applauds, spurring you to try again with increased certainty but diminished restraint. The target has become imaginary. Next comes a game of riddles. A participant offers a witty query, anticipating equally clever replies. This system holds for about a single round. Subsequently, the riddles grow progressively vague, then bewilderingly intricate, and ultimately impossible to distinguish from ordinary comments. You still provide a response, all-around nod, as if it were coherent. The objective isn't victory, but involvement. The goal is uproar. As the games proceed, the atmosphere livens noticeably. Lounging shifts to a semi-seated posture. That semi-seated pose evolves into precarious forward-leaning. Arm movements broaden and goblets tip. A couch leg grows oddly damp. You observe laughter erupting before punchlines arrive. Occasionally, there isn't any joke. Laughter still emerges, as though conjured. Eventually, a sense of rivalry surfaces. One individual insists on tallying points, yet this plan is quickly scrapped when no consensus exists on the regulations or the counts. Another person nonetheless declares themselves the winner. No one argues the declaration. Wine now coats everything: fingers, garments, the ground, even thoughts. The attendants cease their cleaning efforts and shift to limiting harm. They've accepted that the symposium has entered its vigorous stage. You experience an uncommon confidence in your own capabilities. You're certain your accuracy is sharpened, but it hasn't. So with theatrical panache, you flick wine and upset an object. The noise implies the item held value. A momentary silence follows, then supportive laughter. This is the game's modus operandi. They strip away inhibition, boost bravado, and nudge each person to the brink of propriety and beyond. And you're enjoying yourself. You are also thoroughly embarrassing yourself. These two facts coexist. Just as you believe the night has climaxed in benign disorder, philosophy intrudes neither politely nor punctually. It merely bursts in, settles between two overturned goblets, and insists on being treated with gravity. One person audibly clears their throat and declares a subject the specific one is irrelevant. Nobility, fairness, affection, living well, the essence of reality. You instantly recognize these terms and feel a rush of self-assurance, having encountered them previously. This leads you to believe you are competent to contribute. You cautiously compose a considered remark. It begins promisingly, then veers off completely. Nobody observes your error. They are occupied with crafting their own remarks, which they deem more insightful. In no time, the space brims with viewpoints, not debates mere opinions, vocal ones. Each person talks as though unearthing timeless truths on the spot, yet half of these ideas were borrowed from gossip last week, and the rest fabricated during the latest pour. You cut someone off, and they cut you off in return. This is interpreted not as discourtesy but as active participation. Movements turn dramatic. You gesture, wave, recline with greater vigor. At a certain moment, you give your goblet a small knock but manage to catch it before it falls. This strikes you as an achievement worthy of note. You indeed vocalize it, yet no one pays attention. One individual maintains that moral excellence is teachable, another argues it isn't, and a third claims both stances are erroneous without offering justification. You nod eagerly because this resonates as accurate. The wine has now reached a point where every notion seems pressing. Quiet moments grow awkward. You contribute not out of having meaningful input, but because remaining silent seems like defeat. At the far end, someone guffaws at their own argument. Another individual applauds a remark they only partially caught. This is the mechanism by which agreement coalesces. The discussion intensifies, grows more vociferous, and becomes increasingly targeted. You are fervent about something, though the subject remains hazy. Yet the emotion is irrefutable, and then it occurs. You utter a statement you instantly think is ingenious. This feels correct, carries weight, and hits with assurance. The space goes silent for a short while. A person nods. Another echoes a fragment of your words, though somewhat inaccurately. You revel in that instant. Come morning, you won't recall tonight's words, yet you're utterly convinced they altered everything. Philosophy now commands the gathering, and it gets intoxicated eventually. With no official signal, your voice grows louder. This isn't a choice. It occurs naturally, like the ebb and flow of tides, or how flawed notions gain boldness following wine. In your own head, you're not yelling, you're amplifying. There's a distinction, and you believe everyone admires it. Your speech now fills the hall, which seems significant. You lean in on the sofa, making large gestures as if mere loudness could guide your ideas into order. It doesn't, but the attempt is commendable. You observe that raising your voice attracts attention. This strengthens the habit. Eye contact turns into approval. You pause dramatically, but the gaps are excessive, and someone interjects. You subtly increase volume to reassert dominance. It succeeds momentarily. Your reasoning has become basic. Subtlety has slipped out, alongside rationality. You cease providing justifications for your beliefs. You merely assert them strongly, as though conviction itself proves truth. This feels deeply gratifying. Nearby, all others have arrived at a similar phase. Dialogues intersect. Nobody pays complete attention. Individuals reply to sentence pieces, nodding energetically at arguments that were never articulated. Accord and discord merge into one noisy action. Your laughter also intensifies. You aren't fully certain of the source of your mirth, yet the moment seems appropriate. Another person joins in, laughing alongside you. This generates a collective happiness you imagine will be cherished later. It won't be. Your movements grow bold. You topple an object once more. This occasion you are aware. You offer apologies eagerly and carry on talking without awaiting a reply. Society deems this permissible. You are sure your ideas are more lucid than ever before. You sense yourself as eloquent, communicative, unconquerable. In truth, you are reiterating your points with growing certainty and waning accuracy. This fails to trouble you. At a certain stage, you overhear your own speech and think, indeed, this is precisely the manner of a profound intellect. That notion provides immense solace. The space now thrives, noisy, heated, and pulsing with intersecting views. Goblets of wine are endlessly replenished. Attendants have ceased interfering. You have ceased being a participant in the gathering. You have become the symposium, and deep within, a more subdued self is recording observations for the next day. Yet those notes will be entirely disregarded. Then, you spot him. There is, invariably, a certain individual at the event who seems out of place. As others have progressively relaxed, softened, and emotionally surrendered to the wine, this person stays alert and upright. Irritatingly visible, he consumes plenty of wine, yet remarkably remains unaffected. You harbor dislike for this fellow. He lounges tranquilly, attending more than speaking, gaze sharp, stance stable. He recalls people's names, tracks, discussions, responds at fitting times. This bothers you profoundly. You sneak a look at his goblet, wishing to find it secretly contains water. It does not. Whenever you assert something daring, this man cocks his head subtly, with neither hostility nor disdain, but contemplation that is even more troubling. You cannot discern if he concurs, disputes, or merely archives your errors for future reference. A person poses a query to him. He replies succinctly, lucidly, with alarming logic. The gathering falls momentarily silent, as if acknowledging a hunter. A sudden impulse to interject arises, not from dispute, but because quiet seems threatening. Your voice exceeds your intention. He gazes at you once more. That individual will recall this evening, as the rest recycle their remarks, embellish tales, and gradually fall apart. He persists in bringing up new topics. You start to suspect that his consumption of wine differs from others. He treats it as an instrument. This seems inequitable. You console yourself. that nobody will recollect your earlier utterances, that all discourse here will fade by dawn into blurred memories and regret drenched in wine. That conviction shatters each time he nods, offers a faint smile, or precisely addresses a point you made a quarter of an hour ago. You avert his stare and shift position on the sofa, feigning numbness in your arm once more. You burst into loud laughter at a nearby jest, hoping diversion rescues you. It fails. Eventually, a person commends this man for his stamina. He gives a humble shrug, and you begrudge him even for that. The gathering rages around him like a tempest, yet he stays unaffected, a serene hub of recollection and lucidity. You comprehend with a sinking sensation that come morning, when you find it hard to remember the night. That man will recount it for you meticulously. You resolve to consume additional wine. This strikes you as the proper reaction, for if a single individual is destined to retain all your statements tonight, the minimum you can do is guarantee you yourself forget. At a certain juncture, often between an especially assured reasoning and a clumsily directed motion, you detect a significant omission. Women of virtue are absent. This isn't an accidental exclusion, it's deliberate. The gathering is a masculine environment, crafted with precision to be so. Spouses, daughters, and high-status females stay elsewhere, shielded from this display or possibly shielded from your presence. The Greeks term this order. You deem it convenient, since you won't have to confront these women tomorrow. The females who are here are present to listen to your evening discourse and fit into distinct roles. Instrumentalists, performers, sex workers, they are learned, eloquent, and considerably more clear-headed than those lounging on the couches, and this is intentional. Someone must retain the true account of the night, and they navigate the space with rehearsed poise, playing music, chanting, replenishing goblets, watching. At precisely the appropriate moments they chuckle, pay close attention, and jot down mental observations you'll never get to see. You briefly persuade yourself that this elevates the symposium's philosophical tone, minimizing interruptions. You imagine only men and pure ideas, but that's a misconception. The actual outcome is that the room grows noisier, more audacious, and far more self-assured in opinions that haven't faced real-world testing. Someone makes a dramatic proclamation about love, and you enthusiastically agree, forgetting that nobody present has the experience to challenge that perspective. Another fellow declares something about the inherent traits of women, and you nod thoughtfully because agreeing requires less effort than thinking at this stage. The performers stay impartial. They've encountered all this before, just last week and the week prior, possibly from that same man. You try to impress one of them with what you think is a brilliant insight, and she responds with a polite smile. This ought to worry you. It doesn't. The lack of respectable women introduces a peculiar liberty. No restraints, no witnesses of consequence, ideas multiply unchecked, and self-assurance swells. The gathering transforms into a sealed container where notions bounce around encountering no resistance, growing louder and less precise with each iteration. You feel bolder, safer, less answerable, and you later understand this is precisely the issue, because a space where only one type of voice is permitted doesn't become wiser. It becomes noisier, and tonight, noise is triumphing. By now, the atmosphere has shifted. You sense it. The air is denser, more oppressive, saturated with smoke, wine, perspiration, and arrogance. Lamps flicker, shadows stretch across the walls. What once seemed intimate now feels crowded, even though no newcomer has arrived. This is the consequence of too many opinions squeezed into too small a space. You are hot, uncomfortably hot, the sort of heat that makes you forget when you last felt at ease. You shift on the sofa, attempting to cool down without standing, because standing would entail you loosen your clothes a little and instantly feel this was the right move. But it wasn't. Voices now constantly overlap. Conversations no longer take turns. They crash into each other. Someone across the room erupts in loud laughter, not because anything was amusing, but because laughing has become a reflex. You join in without understanding why, and that feels perfectly natural. Emotions start leaking into the dialogue. What began as abstract notions now sounds suspiciously personal. A debate about fairness turns into a grievance about mistreatment, and a discussion about virtue morphs into an accusation. Someone references honor, another takes it as a slight. You're uncertain why, but you nod. You catch yourself reacting quicker than you can think. Words tumble out before they're fully formed. You cut someone off mid-sentence, then instantly forget what you were about to say. You fill the silence with noise. This seems to work. The warmth makes everything feel urgent. Every claim sounds profoundly important. You're convinced that if you don't speak now, your idea will vanish forever. This is a mistake, yet you speak anyway. Several people talk at once. Nobody wins. Someone slams a cup down for effect. Wine spills, and no one cleans it up because that would slow the pace. Another person leans forward dramatically, bumping knees with a neighbor. Apologies are exchanged loudly and promptly forgotten, and you notice faces are redder now. Eyes are brighter, movements sharper. The symposium has hit its emotional operating temperature, and this is when remarks are made that will echo softly, often at inconvenient moments. You feel alive, engaged, fully present, yet you also sense a faint danger, like standing too close to a fire you ignited yourself. The room is no longer merely hosting the symposium. The room is the symposium, pulsing loudly, emotionally charged, one careless sentence away from becoming unforgettable. At some point, the argument you were passionately defending simply vanishes. It doesn't conclude, it doesn't get resolved. It just quietly slips out of your grasp, like a thought you were absolutely certain you had 5 seconds earlier. This ought to alarm you. It doesn't. What remains is confidence pure, undiluted confidence. You no longer recall what sparked the debate, but you're sure you were correct. You feel this deep in your bones, in your gestures, in the way you nod while someone else speaks, as if confirming points that may or may not align with what you were saying moments before. Someone challenges you. You respond instantly. Without hesitation, the response is firm, decisive, and completely unrelated to the challenge. Nobody points this out. That would break the momentum. Momentum is sacred. Now, you start repeating yourself. This feels intentional, as if it's emphasis. You believe repetition adds power. It doesn't, but the conviction behind it is impressive. Each time you restate your point, you do so louder, as if volume might summon clarity back into existence. Across the room, the same phenomenon is unfolding. Everyone has lost the thread, but nobody has lost certainty. Statements float freely, detached from evidence, context, or even grammar. They occasionally collide and are immediately applauded. You hear yourself say something and think, yes, exactly. That's what I intended, even though you have no idea what you intended. Someone agrees with you enthusiastically. This feels validating. You don't question why they agree or what they think. Agreement alone suffices. You are no longer debating ideas, you are defending a feeling. The feeling that you are right and that this matters. Silence feels threatening, so you fill it quickly, and others do the same. The room hums with overlapping declarations, none of which require follow-up. You lean back, satisfied. Your work here is done. You have contributed meaningfully to the evening's intellectual atmosphere. Somewhere nearby, someone is still sober enough to notice the disconnect, but you don't look at them. The symposium has reached a crucial stage, the point where clarity is gone, memory is unreliable, but confidence has achieved total independence. This is dangerous territory, but it feels incredible. Eventually, the symposium doesn't end. It simply loses momentum and collapses inward, like a tired argument that can no longer support itself. Nobody announces that it's time to leave. People just begin failing to continue. You attempt to sit up fully. This decision was an error. Your physical form delivers a short yet forceful message that spending hours lounging sideways while consuming alcohol was never included in its original blueprint. You stop, feigning that this momentary halt was deliberate. Nobody challenges it. Numerous individuals are engaged in identical actions. Across the space, dialogues dissolve before completion. A person starts an idea, loses it midway, and substitutes it with chuckles. A different individual rises excessively quickly, instantly feels remorse and simulates performing a thoughtful stretch. An attendant emerges carrying a lantern. That is the universal indication. The evening has progressed to its concluding stage. Supported leaving, the servant refrains from inquiring whether assistance is required. They are already aware that you ascend cautiously, moving one extremity at a time, bargaining with gravitational force as if it could potentially be flexible. The ground appears more distant than anticipated, and the sofa that previously deceived you now attempts to draw you back. You decline. Footwear is handed back to you, and you gaze at them momentarily, as if uncertain about their function. Eventually, you slip them on, not precisely but sufficiently. Outdoors, the nocturnal atmosphere strikes you with harsh candor. It is chillier, more biting, and far less awed by your self-assurance. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it because the alcoholic beverage does not welcome fresh oxygen. A person puts a stabilizing hand upon your forearm, and you welcome this without a word. Self-reliance ceases to be important. While you proceed, the road appears lengthier than it did during the inward journey. The lantern glow oscillates and darkness elongates. You experience a blend of intensive reflection and significant hollowness. This seems intellectual, thus you resolve not to challenge it. You try to recollect the night. You recollect pieces, mirth, forceful viewpoints, the face of the teetotaler, a statement you uttered that seemed meaningful. The specifics have vanished, yet the conviction persists that you were excellent. Your companion listens patiently while you recap your own reflections aloud to yourself, but they offer no reply. This demonstrates compassion. When you eventually arrive at your entrance, you halt, sensing that something significant occurred, something enduring, something deserving of memory. You will not recall it the following day. You will arise with a headache, a parched throat, and an indistinct notion that you need to apologize to someone. However, you will not be certain to whom. This evening, nevertheless, you are persuaded that the gathering was triumphant. You endured it, and in classical Hellenic society that qualified as involvement, dawn comes with complete disregard for your previous night's activities. There is no soft changeover, no courteous break. You awaken as if called by an irate deity who has examined your conduct and deemed it unsatisfactory. Your cranium aches in a fashion that seems reflective. Your lips are parched. Your vision fights against opening, and your physique refuses to comply without bargaining. You remain motionless for a while, wishing that this is fleeting, but it is not. When recollection emerges, it does so in a partial and harsh manner. You recall self-assurance, you recall loudness, you recall being utterly convinced of your rightness, but you fail to recall the reason. Segments appear: a motion, a chuckle that persisted excessively, a statement that commenced with certainty and concluded in a hazardous place. You revisit instances, trusting that understanding will emerge. And instead, uncovering only additional strata of remorse, you gradually sit upright. This sensation resembles an error, yet you persist regardless. The chamber angles a bit as though providing opinion. You interpret this as disapproval. Now the genuine peril arrives, encountering people. Each stroller seems like a possible observer. Did they overhear you during the night, or did they hear concerning you overnight? You scrutinize countenances for identification, evaluation, or even worse, entertainment. A person welcomes you cheerfully, yet this fails to comfort you. Cordiality indicates recollection. You try to reconstruct the gathering rationally. There existed great beverage, there existed discussion, there existed humor at one moment, and you were prevailing in a dispute. You are confident of this. The absence of proof does not disturb you. It merely irritates you. Afterwards, you recall him, the temperate individual, the one who paid attention, the one who nodded, the one who will recollect every utterance you made correctly and without clemency. You experience a coldness independent of the morning breeze, and you contemplate evading him permanently. Through the day, routine duties seem more weighty, dialogues appear more noisy, and each noise seems targeted. You pledge to yourself that you will never imbibe so heavily once more. This vow seems genuine and will endure until the subsequent request. By evening, the severest part of the unease diminishes. abandoning a known feeling of submission. No matter what you uttered, it is now irreversible. The assembly has transitioned into reminiscence. Your own recollection is broken and lenient, while those of others are exact and enduring. You affirm to yourself that this constitutes part of the procedure. That is how concepts are examined. That is how individuals gain knowledge, and chiefly, that is how individuals learn to moderate their alcohol intake. You endure the morning, you survive the daytime, and come nightfall, you nearly convince yourself that you would repeat the entire experience with some separation and abundant hydration. You start to grasp the true nature of the previous night. It was not disorder, nor was it polish. It was an intermediate state, a peculiar human apparatus that transformed grape beverage, utterances, pride, and duration into notions that occasionally possessed significance. Hellenic symposia of antiquity did not generate wisdom because all participants conducted themselves appropriately. They generated wisdom because participants did not. Conceptions were not delivered in quiet or tranquil meditation. They arose from dispute, inconsistency, hyperbole, and the outright persistence to continue conversing, even when reasoning had obviously departed the premises. You did not join the gathering to discover verity. You joined to assess it vociferously, flawed, and before observers. You cast notions into the chamber as other participants cast grape beverage, heedlessly, eagerly, and with minimal worry about tidying. The majority of what was expressed during the evening will never be consequential. It will disintegrate into humors, recountings, and vicarious shame. Yet several remnants, an inquiry, a provocation, an inconsistency will persist. Some individual will recall them, another will reconsider them while sober, yet another will transcribe them afterwards, devoid of the slurred speech and self-assurance. That is the segment that recorded chronicles choose to omit. The magnificent thoughts of classical Hellas did not come into being entirely shaped from tranquil intellects. They were forged in spaces akin to this, hazy and noisy. These were uneasy chambers, where individuals lounged clumsily, overindulged in beverages, interjected one another, and confused assuredness for understanding, until comprehension sometimes emerged coincidentally. You were not joining a celebration. You were engaging in a societal mechanism. In the symposium, social ranks faded, inhibitions relaxed, and conflicting opinions clashed with no decisive victor. Participants could voice erroneous views boldly, allowing others to refine them afterward. What endured wasn't the initial statement, but the revision. Such evenings gave birth to philosophy, governance, drama, and creative expression. It wasn't a perfect setting. It was authentically human, chaotic, passionate, imperfect, repetitive, and noisy. When envisioning Greek gatherings, forget serene figures in white garments. Instead, imagine a space brimming with boldness, overturned goblets, incomplete reflections, and an individual with total recall. Concepts emerged from discord, not harmony. Your purpose wasn't to conform. Your role was to participate, however poorly, and miraculously it succeeded. That's the reality of these Greek festivities. Prior to culinary tradition, cooking was mere survival. Epochs before kitchens acquired boundaries or titles, they were simply circles of rocks encircling an ever-burning flame. For early civilizations, fire represented humanity's initial instrument, earliest innovation, and crucial boundary between survival and demise. Culinary practice originated not from flavor, but from imperative. Our ancestors soon discovered the dangers of uncooked sustenance. Meat decayed rapidly, tubers were tough to process, and microscopic parasites posed hidden dangers. Heat transformed these challenges. It tenderized fibrous material, eliminated pathogens, and liberated calories locked within vegetation and animal tissue. Roasting prey not only reduced health risks, it also enabled feeding larger groups over extended periods. This marks cooking as mankind's first efficiency innovation. Those initial dishes were basic yet intentional. Flesh pierced onto pointed rods or placed directly onto heated rocks. Root vegetables were interred in embers to bake gradually beneath the earth. Every part served a purpose. Bones splintered for marrow, rendered fat sizzled in the flames, imparting taste to surroundings. Smoke permeated hair, epidermis, and attire, defining the aroma of everyday existence. Formal instructions were absent, yet wisdom persisted. Seasoned individuals understood which vegetation turned safe through heat exposure and which stayed lethal regardless of treatment. Flames rendered acrid roots palatable and converted toxic grains into dietary essentials. Culinary skills were acquired via observation, imitation, and memory rather than written records. Gradually, the management of fire evolved into a structured practice. Fireplaces were constructed in permanent locations, debris removed, rocks positioned, ventilation controlled, nothing was haphazard. An efficient hearth provided uniform temperature, leading to dependable meals. Dependable sustenance fostered steadiness, which ultimately encouraged permanent communities. Thus, cooking rooted people to specific locales well before agriculture dominated. Taste emerged subsequently. Initially, only warmth, vapors, and duration existed, yet inclinations still developed. Certain edibles proved more enjoyable when grilled rather than simmered. Specific cuts of meat became sweeter through gradual cooking. Such minor insights formed the precursors to gastronomy. Cooking's inception wasn't refined. It was hazy, disorderly, and hazardous. Burns occurred frequently, blazes expanded, yet each prepared dish subtly reconfigured human physiology and cognition, enabling greater vitality, expanded groups, and increased longevity. Prior to its status as art, custom, or enjoyment, cooking represented the synergy of flame, endurance, and appetite. With mastery over fire came containment of cookery. In Mesopotamia, among the first urban societies globally, this transition materialized emphatically. Pottery crafted from clay revolutionized historic food preparation spaces permanently. Edibles were no longer limited to grilling or charring. They could be gently boiled, combined, and altered gradually. Mesopotamian culinary spaces centered on earthenware containers placed inside fireplaces. Those pots facilitated simmering and braising techniques, ideal for a terrain molded by waterways. Cereal crops and animals barley, wheat, alliums, legumes constituted the core of everyday sustenance. Flesh was a premium item, extended by simmering in liquids that satisfied numerous people simultaneously. What renders Mesopotamian cuisine remarkable? It was documented on clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform. Clerks inscribed some of humanity's most ancient surviving formulas. This wasn't verse but utilitarian guidance. Amounts, procedures, and components. Culinary practice formally joined the domain of wisdom meriting conservation, and the stews were intricate. They united protein with leek, botanicals, fermented condiments, and lipids. Certain formulations employed dairy, ale, or gore as binding agents. Taste derived from equilibrium, not piquancy. Warmth, salinity, acidity, and savory tones combined in arrangements that seem contemporary. These dishes weren't prepared in solitude. Food preparation zones functioned as communal hubs, notably in expansive homes and sanctuaries. Female attendants and indentured laborers produced sustenance in bulk, nourishing kinfolk, workers, and idols equally. Divine tributes received identical meticulousness as human fare, underscoring the link between celestial and earthly realms through cuisine. Innovations subtly underpinned this. Hearths, fashioned from clay and stone-enabled loaf baking, while lidded receptacles regulated moisture loss and warmth. Covers were critical, duration was critical, expertise was critical. A skilled chef was prized for dependability as much as flavor. Mesopotamian culinary traditions reveal a key insight. When ingredients could be stored, they became manageable. Repasts could become heartier, more satisfying, and steady. Food preparation transcended mere daily survival. It involved maintaining civilization from smoky hearths to simmering pottages. The historic food preparation area achieved its initial defined form in ancient Egypt. Culinary activity mirrored the river's course. The Nile enriched farmlands and nourished vegetation, but also dictated the tempo of everyday eating. Water level fluctuations determined which crops could be cultivated, preserved, and ingested. Egyptian cuisine was thoroughly utilitarian, thriving on abundance when nature permitted and frugality when it didn't. Loaves formed the base of most repasts, chiefly from emmer, wheat, and barley. Varieties abounded, flattened, dense, date, sweetened, or molded into offertory rounds. Pulverizing grain demanded strenuous effort, typically undertaken daily with stone mills. Grit inevitably infiltrated the flour, gradually eroding dentition throughout one's lifespan. Consuming bread provided sustenance, but wasn't tender. Beer held equal importance. Opaque, textured, and mildly alcoholic, it offered safer hydration than water and was ingested by all ages. Ale was made from half-cooked loaves fragmented, steeped, and fermented. It delivered energy, vitamins, and solace, functioning more as a fluid repast than a contemporary beverage. Egyptian food preparation areas were basic yet orderly. Fireplaces were constructed from sun-dried brick, and earthen furnaces heated bread by retaining warmth within arched enclosures. Cooking vessels possessed curved bases, meant to rest in cinders or be stabilized by pebbles. No haste prevailed. Most preparations cooked gently. Sustained by endurance more than heat, plant matter supplemented areas where flesh was insufficient. Alliums, onion, leek, garlic, leafy greens, and pulses were prevalent, consumed raw or incorporated into broths. Aquatic creatures from the Nile were extensively eaten, desiccated, or brined for storage. Livestock, bovine, caprine, or fowl, was allocated for celebrations, religious sites, and affluent individuals. It was a rare indulgence for the majority, not an everyday occurrence. Spices like coriander, cumin, and various herbs were employed with restraint, subtly accentuating dishes without overpowering them. Honey served as the main sweetening agent, reserved for special bread and cake preparations. The primary goal of cooking was to provide sustenance, equilibrium, and comfort, rather than extravagance. Meals carried profound symbolic weight. Offerings left in burial sites and sacred spaces replicated actual dishes, reflecting the belief that dining persisted beyond death. Mastery in the kitchen meant more than a good life, it was preparation for the afterlife. Egyptian culinary practices were methodical, consistent, and dependable, sustaining a society that cherished structure, stability, and natural balance, one bread loaf and one beer cup at a time. Ancient Greek cooking moved from enclosed spaces into the open environment. The architecture of Greek houses featured central courtyards, and kitchens were similarly designed. Smoke rose freely, natural light streamed from above, and meals were influenced equally by weather conditions and traditions. While simpler than the culinary methods of Mesopotamia or Egypt, Greek cooking was equally deliberate. Olive oil stood at the core of Greek cuisine, serving simultaneously as a source of fats, energy, taste, and food preservation. It took the place of animal fats in most recipes, employed for frying, dressing, and keeping ingredients fresh. A simple snack of bread, soaked in olive oil, constituted a complete dish. Vegetables prepared in olive oil were thought to be fully satisfying. Even grilled fish commonly received just a drizzle of oil and a sprinkle of herbs. Rather than stationary hearths, Greek kitchens utilized movable clay braziers. These compact charcoal grills could be relocated based on the climate or event. Cooking vessels were set directly on these braziers for boiling or stewing, while skewers enabled roasting of meat. This adaptability matched a culture that prized alfresco activities and shared dining. Cereals continued to be fundamental. However, Greek bread was coarse and solid, frequently combined with barley. Bread made from wheat was available, but costly and linked to social standing. The daily diet for the majority consisted of porridge and unleavened flatbreads. Meals provided satiety rather than luxury. Vegetables were plentiful and essential, including cabbage, onions, lentils, chickpeas, and leafy greens, frequently prepared in a straightforward manner or consumed raw. Seafood, particularly among coastal populations, was more prevalent than land animal flesh. The consumption of meat was intimately connected with sacrificial ceremonies. Livestock were butchered on sacred festival days, turning cooking into a collective ritual performance. The deities were offered the smoke and fatty portions, while humans consumed the remainder. Greek cuisine derived its taste from moderation. Aromatic herbs such as oregano, thyme, and mint enhanced dishes without overshadowing them. Garlic was a frequent ingredient. Wine featured in recipes, and vinegar added acidity to sauces. Exotic spices from far-off regions were available, but remained uncommon and expensive, employed very frugally, if at all. Dining occasions were both communal and formal. Men frequently assembled for symposia, dining in a reclined position as attendants served meals, while women prepared the food but seldom joined these events. Thus, cooking mirrored societal divisions equally with flavor preferences. Greek gastronomy emphasized a balance between plainness and nutrition, ceremony and habit. The culinary space was not intended to dazzle, but rather to support physical, mental, and civic well-being, one olive oil preparation at a time. Ancient Roman cooking was divided between two contrasting realms. On one side stood the kitchens of the affluent, equipped with utensils, slave labor, and foreign provisions. On the other side lay the streets, which were where the bulk of Romans truly consumed their meals. Most inhabitants resided in tight, confined tenement buildings that offered minimal or no cooking facilities. Because open fires posed risks and domestic kitchens were scarce, Roman urban centers evolved into some of history's earliest genuine street food societies. The streets were dotted with thermopolia compact eateries, featuring counters fitted with clay vessels containing warm cuisine. Quick meals such as stews, pulses, bread, sausages, and deep-fried items were dispensed rapidly to laborers, tourists, and the city's impoverished. Dining took place on foot, frequently using one's hands amid the clamor, haze, and calling hawkers. Ease of access was prioritized over leisure. For Romans fortunate enough to have home cooking capabilities, their kitchens were practical yet filled with smoke. Fires consumed timber or charcoal, and vessels made from bronze or iron withstood high temperatures. Romans employed roasting, boiling, frying, and baking techniques with assurance. Both private and communal bread ovens turned out loaves in industrial quantities to supply cities with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. A hallmark of Roman cookery was its sauces, particularly garum, a concoction created from fermented fish entrails, sun-ripened. This sauce was exceptionally salty, strong-smelling, and unavoidable. It was incorporated into almost every dish, ranging from meats and vegetables even to wine. To Roman palates, garum was far from repulsive, it was indispensable, and Roman gastronomy was also international in scope. The empire amassed ingredients from all over Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Black pepper arrived from India, dates from arid regions, and wines from Gaul and Hispania. Affluent families vied with each other via opulence, offering strange beasts, fattened dormice, and intricate multi-course banquets aimed equally at astonishing visitors as at nourishing them. In high-status Roman households, cooking was a theatrical affair. Trained chefs directed groups of enslaved workers, carefully coordinating dish timing to harmonize with dialogue and entertainment. Culinary texts by authors such as Apicius emphasized abundance, intricacy, and originality. Meals signified social standing, but under the lavishness, the everyday Roman diet stayed simple: bread, olives, legumes, and diluted wine. Meat was eaten rarely, and scarcity of food was a regular experience. Culinary practices mirrored the disparities of the Roman Empire. Food abounded throughout Roman life in domestic kitchens, on thoroughfares, within temples, and at feasts. Cookery evolved beyond mere sustenance or custom. It became a marker of identity, authority, and ostentation. Transitioning to the Aztec Empire, cooking started not merely with flame, but also with stone. Maize formed a bedrock of everyday sustenance, yet it was inedible when uncooked. It required transformation via nixtamalization, immersing dried kernels in an alkaline mixture derived from lime or ash. This treatment tenderized the grains, liberated essential nutrients, and converted maize into a resource capable of supporting a vast civilization. This process was no fortunate chemical happenstance. It represented ancestral wisdom honed across many generations. In the absence of nixtamalization, corn leads to nutritional deficiencies, but when processed this way, it becomes a fully nourishing grain. All Aztec households relied on this subtle yet ingenious method after preparation. The kernels were manually milled on a metate, a flat stone surface paired with a hefty grinding implement. This arduous routine was typically performed by women before sunrise each day. The outcome was masa, a pliable dough that served as the basis for tortillas, tamales, and innumerable other dishes. Cooking commenced at dawn since appetite afforded no delays. Aztec cooking fires were rudimentary, typically 3 stones that held a clay comel, a level griddle warmed directly over flames. Tortillas were prepared rapidly, turned manually, and consumed right away. These items were not mere side dishes, they functioned as plates, utensils, and essential staples simultaneously. All food was wrapped within them. Meals consisted of beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, and herbs. Meat consumption was infrequent. Turkey, dog, fish, or insects were only occasionally eaten, but the majority followed a plant-based diet out of necessity rather than belief. Chilies added spiciness, taste, and helped preserve food. Dishes were known for their fiery, smoky, and intensely fragrant qualities. A significant beverage was chocolate, produced by grinding cacao beans and blending them with water, chili, and spices, resulting in a bitter drink. This frothy, chilled chocolate was no dessert. It served as a ritual item, a form of currency, and a status symbol. Only the upper class could consume it without restriction. For the rest, it was considered sacred and uncommon. In the Aztec realm, cooking was deeply intertwined with spirituality. Fire was viewed as a living entity. Food was offered to deities. Mealtimes aligned with calendars, ceremonies, and cosmic rhythms. Even routine cooking had profound spiritual significance. Their technology was understated yet efficient. Despite the absence of metal pots, their culinary system functioned perfectly. Materials like stone, clay, and heat, along with precise timing, substituted for iron and steel. Efficiency derived from inherited knowledge rather than advanced implements. Aztec culinary methods were labor-heavy, monotonous, and vital. Each tortilla required several hours of effort. Each meal served as a reminder that survival relied on wisdom transmitted from one person to another across generations. In this context, cooking was not about extravagance or exhibition. It was about discipline and commitment transformed into food in ancient times. Ancient Chinese cooking developed towards efficiency, equilibrium, and regulation. In contrast to societies that emphasized roasting and open fires, Chinese kitchens preferred techniques that saved fuel and enhanced nutritional value. Initially, this was not about philosophy, but practicality. Firewood was precious, populations were high, so cooking needed to be quick, consistent, and dependable. The hearth was small. It was commonly constructed close to the floor, with vents arranged to direct heat accurately. From this innovation emerged the wok, one of the most impactful cooking implements ever created. Due to their thin metal construction, they heated up rapidly, enabling food to cook in seconds instead of minutes. Stir-frying was not merely a convenience for speed. It was a necessity in a world where resources were scarce. Chopping was as crucial as the cooking process itself. Ingredients were cut into small, even pieces before being heated, thus shortening cooking duration and making eating simpler. With the use of chopsticks, knives were applied only during preparation, not at the dining table. Cooking eliminated the need for cutting at the meal. Meals demanded balance. Grains constituted the foundation of nutrition. In northern regions, millet and wheat were predominant, whereas in the south, rice was central to everyday existence. Rice was steamed instead of baked, prepared in covered containers that retained heat and humidity. Steaming maintained the food's texture and nutrients, while consuming less fuel compared to boiling. Vegetables were ever present, including cabbage, leafy greens, mushrooms, bamboo shoots, and root vegetables. Soybeans were converted into tofu, sauces, and pastes via fermentation. This represented another subtle achievement in food technology. Fermented products provided protein, taste, and extended storage life without requiring cold storage. Meat was consumed but sparingly. Pork and chicken were typical when accessible, but were always extended with vegetables and grains. Bone stocks were used to draw out all available nutrients, ensuring no waste. The cooking approach mirrored the conviction that equilibrium, not excess, maintained well-being. Seasoning adhered to the same principle. Soy sauce, vinegar, ginger, garlic, and spring onions added depth of flavor without dominating the dish. Spices were applied with intention, not in excess. The objective was to achieve a balance among salty, sour, bitter, sweet, and umami flavors. Chinese culinary traditions were also closely linked to medicine. Foods were classified according to their influence on the body: heating, cooling, drying, or moisturizing. What you prepared to eat varied based on the time of year, your physical condition, and your age. The kitchen functioned as a part of preventive healthcare. In historical China, cooking was not about showmanship. It was about expertise through moderation. Cooking times were short, chopping was exact, and dishes were intended to nourish the body and preserve harmony subtly, effectively, and daily. In historic India, culinary practices were influenced by weather, spiritual convictions, and an early command of taste. Contrasting with many ancient food traditions that depended on mild seasoning, Indian cuisine adopted intricacy from early times. Heat, fragrance, and spices were not after-the-fact additions. They were the core of the kitchen. Grains served as the staple of everyday meals. Wheat was predominant in the north, formed into flatbreads baked on hot griddles, while rice was staple in the south, either boiled or steamed, to partner with curries and vegetables. These foundations were satisfying but deliberately bland, intended to support more intense flavors added on top. The real standout of Indian cooking was its employment of spices: turmeric, cumin, coriander, and mustard seeds. Ginger and black pepper were not applied haphazardly. Spices were roasted, pulverized, and blended with intention. They helped preserve food in warm environments, supported digestion, and contributed complexity. Without depending on animal protein, cooking in this region was a chemical process steered by expertise. Heat was managed yet steady. Earthen stoves used wood or dried dung as fuel, generating consistent heat perfect for simmering. Vessels had thick walls, made to cook lentils, vegetables, and grains into wholesome broths. These meals could be left to cook without supervision, allowing time for labor and ceremonies. Intake of meat differed greatly. In numerous areas, it was restricted or completely shunned because of religious reasons. In particular, the cow was regarded as holy, leading to a diet centered on dairy rather than butchery. Milk was turned into yogurt, butter, and clarified ghee, which emerged as a crucial cooking fat. Ghee contributed lusciousness, durability, and taste, and it heated without smoking in pans. Meat-free cooking flourished not as a limitation but as a form of creativity. Lentils and pulses supplied protein. Vegetables were prepared using numerous methods: frying, stewing, spicing, or fermenting. Dishes achieved equilibrium across consistencies and tastes, delivering satiety without overindulgence. Culinary practices were heavily ritualized. Eating was governed by guidelines of cleanliness and timing, and specific foods were consumed at particular hours. Hands were regularly cleansed and utensils were washed thoroughly. Dining was not informal. It was a regulated activity connected to well-being and devotion. Historical Indian kitchens also had knowledge of the human body. Food was categorized by its impacts: warming or cooling. Cooking that was rich or light served as preventive healthcare intended to maintain bodily balance instead of treating disease. In India, cooking stood for more than nourishing the body. It involved harmonizing the body with its surroundings. Faith and equilibrium. Each spice and technique had a role extending well beyond flavor, supporting life in both material and divine aspects throughout antiquity. Though kitchens varied dramatically in appearance, They addressed the identical challenge with impressive ingenuity. Constructed from rock, clay, or earth, the fire pit remained the core of everyday existence. Cooking was never a secondary activity. It was a perpetual chore carried out daily, influencing physiques, routines, and communities. Ancient culinary practices demonstrate how profoundly humans adjusted to their surroundings. Within river valleys, stews extended both grains and meat. In arid regions, spices acted as preservatives and digestive aids. Across wooded areas and flatlands, roasting and smoking techniques guarded against decay. Each method arose from need rather than convenience. Technology exerted a subtle yet critical influence. Earthenware vessels enabled slow simmering. Flat stones served as cooking surfaces. Fermentation transformed perishable items into lasting essentials. None demanded sophisticated instruments, merely attention, endurance, and consistency. Innovation frequently appeared not as advancement, but as gradual improvement. Additionally, culinary practices highlighted social disparities. Upper classes enjoyed diversity and showmanship. Ordinary folk consumed what nourished them. Urban street stalls nourished populations. Religious temple kitchens provided for deities. Identical flames prepared both sustenance dishes and lavish feasts, contingent upon ingredient ownership. In numerous societies, gender and toil were intrinsically tied to the culinary space. Women carried the everyday weight of food preparation, milling cereals, managing flames, hauling water, scrubbing vessels. Cookery required hours, physical power, and stamina. Dinners were not simple. They had to be worked for, and sustenance held significance surpassing mere caloric intake. Sacrifices paid homage to gods. Specific dishes signified celebrations, social standing, or cleanliness. What one consumed and the manner of consumption mirrored personal identity. Culinary practices determined membership as strongly as speech or attire. Despite difficulties, historical cookery was resourceful. No component went unused. Skeletons turned into stock. Residue transformed into soil supplement. Remnants became the next day's nourishment. Today's plenty frequently obscures such knowledge, yet early kitchens operated with exactness and discipline. Perhaps most remarkable is how recognizable those dishes remain. Loaves, broths, condiments, unleavened breads, cultured items, these are not artifacts. They are underpinnings, still relevant today. Contemporary culinary spaces are more indebted to historical ones than is commonly acknowledged. Ancient gastronomy was deliberate, hazy, and strenuous, yet it was also wise, flexible, and profoundly humane. Each dish embodied ages of collective expertise transmitted manually, well before documented knowledge or contemporary inventions. Historical chefs addressed the paramount challenge, converting natural resources into sustenance daily, using any implements at hand. Nikola Tesla entered the world in 1856, amid a fierce lightning tempest in a tiny settlement within the Austrian Empire. Family lore holds that thunder roared across the heavens precisely as he was born. This caused a midwife to pronounce the infant a child of night, yet his mother replied serenely, "No, a child of light." This metaphorical embellishment trailed Tesla throughout his existence. Starting in childhood, Tesla's cognition operated uniquely. He did not conceive concepts hazily. Instead, as a boy, he perceived them completely constructed. He endured intense optical illusions, abrupt bursts of illumination, paired with visuals so authentic they merged with tangible reality. Such occurrences were alarming, yet they also conditioned his intellect to function inwardly. To manage, Tesla mastered mental imagery, intentionally spinning items in his mind's eye, scrutinizing them conceptually, rectifying imperfections prior to any actual construction. This skill eventually emerged as his foremost asset. Tesla was raised amid linguistic richness, rigor, and high anticipation. Tesla's father, a Serbian Orthodox clergyman, desired his son to become a scholar of literature, not technology. His mother, despite being unable to read or write, was a talented creator in her own capacity, devising domestic implements and mechanical devices solely from innate insight. Subsequently, Tesla attributed his creative drive to her, though she never penned a single sentence. During youth, Tesla was compulsive. He committed entire volumes to memory, engaged in arithmetic mental exercises for amusement, and cultivated an obsessive connection with sequences and recurrence. Physically delicate, yet intellectually indefatigable, Tesla experienced sleep in brief intervals, his mind never ceasing activity, and disease almost claimed his life during adolescence. Confined to bed by cholera, he lingered close to demise for many months. In a critical instance, his father vowed that should Tesla recover, permission to pursue engineering would be granted. Tesla regained health and never neglected the agreement. Thereafter, his existence focused on a single objective: domination of electrical science while still a pupil. He encountered difficulties with authoritative figures. He labored compulsively, subsequently resisted. He amazed educators, subsequently let them down. His genius was unquestionable, yet his struggle to conform to standard structures was equally evident. When Tesla departed his residence, he was already partially inhabiting tomorrow. He was conceptualizing devices internally that humanity lacked the instruments, forbearance, or creativity to grasp at that time. Upon departing his early residence to chase engineering, Tesla did not commence learning as a typical scholar. Searching for direction, he entered as an individual certain that his intellect already functioned more rapidly than the structure intended to restrain it. This friction characterized his early maturity. Tesla undertook engineering studies in Graz, where his exceptional aptitude instantly became noticeable. He could execute intricate mathematical computations mentally, recall academic texts verbatim, and picture mechanical systems with photographic precision. Initially, instructors commended him, yet Tesla didn't simply learn about electricity, he became consumed by it. He toiled from dawn until late evening, resting merely several hours, driving himself with a rigor approaching self-harm. In this period, Tesla grew obsessed with alternating current, while direct current was then the prevailing method. He found it exasperating, energy inefficient, necessitating continuous adjustment, and lacking grace. Tesla held that electrical current ought to move organically, cyclically, like respiration. He firmly believed alternating current represented the future, despite his teachers rejecting it as unfeasible or hazardous. Discord ensued as Tesla openly opposed instructors, rectifying them in public and declining to relinquish notions he deemed accurate. What started as respect transformed into worry. His work schedule grew inconsistent. Intervals of intense output were succeeded by breakdown. Betting games entered initially as diversion, later as obsession, and he forfeited his educational funding. His scholarly route shattered, and Tesla never finished his qualification. For the majority, this would have marked the narrative's conclusion, evidence that ability-lacking regimen yields no result. Yet Tesla was not done. He wandered through Europe, operating temporarily as an engineer, mending apparatus, examining devices, and honing his concepts mentally. He was impoverished, frequently famished, but intellectually vibrant, and then arrived the instant that brought everything into focus. While strolling with an acquaintance in a garden declaiming verse, Tesla abruptly halted. In a sudden burst of understanding, he envisioned the revolving magnetic field, the crucial element for enabling alternating current motors to operate effectively. He sketched blueprints in the earth using a twig, articulating a scheme that had not yet been realized materially, yet was fully developed within his cognition. Such was Tesla's method. He never fiddled aimlessly. He paused until comprehension arrived, then moved with conviction, but conviction couldn't cover housing costs. The European continent had no place for an individual who confronted authority, spurned tradition, and declined concessions. Tesla understood that for his concepts to endure, he required an alternative platform. That platform existed beyond the Atlantic, in a nation driven by aspiration, velocity, and cables for electricity yet to be installed. Upon reaching New York City in 1884, Nikola Tesla brought scarcely more than a document of recommendation. With only a handful of poems and an unshakable conviction in his concepts, the metropolis hummed with electrical energy, yet not the variety Tesla championed. The United States operated on direct current, and its foremost proponent was Thomas Edison. Tesla's first job with Edison involved mending dynamos and addressing engineering challenges. Where others failed, he swiftly earned the admiration of his managers. Whenever equipment malfunctioned, Tesla repaired it. Whenever blueprints hit a dead end, he refined them. His intellect navigated intricate problems with ease, yet appreciation did not translate into esteem. Edison advocated for empirical testing and relentless tinkering. In contrast, Tesla placed his faith in exact theoretical frameworks and conceptual engineering. The pair were utterly incompatible. Edison openly disparaged alternating current, labeling it hazardous and unworkable. Tesla, however, viewed direct current as wasteful and restrictive. What started as a workplace dispute escalated into a full-blown clash of philosophies. According to Tesla, Edison vowed him a significant reward for enhancing his apparatus, a pledge Edison later dismissed as a jest. Whether due to misunderstanding or deceit, the outcome remained unchanged. Tesla resigned. Embarrassed and penniless, the ensuing period was ruthless. To stay alive, Tesla excavated trenches. The very individual who had conceptualized the electrical future toiled with a spade, receiving a day's pay to enter conduits he considered outdated. Nonetheless, amidst the grime, Tesla never relinquished his notions. He bided his time until his chance arrived. Once financiers acknowledged the promise of his AC system, Tesla at last obtained the means to construct and showcase his engine. Upon activation, it operated without a hitch, seamless, effective, and expandable, validating every assertion Tesla had made. This sparked the conflict known as the Battle of the Currents. Edison initiated a scare tactic in the media, killing animals with electricity to paint AC as lethal. Tesla countered not with showmanship, but with controlled experiments. He permitted electrical current to course through his own frame, illuminating bulbs with no wires attached, proving to the populace that AC could be managed without danger. The struggle extended beyond engineering. It involved supremacy, prestige, and the architect of tomorrow. Edison possessed financial resources, manufacturing plants, and clout. Tesla offered foresight. Yet in the end, pragmatism determined the outcome. AC could be transmitted over great spans with negligible dissipation. DC lacked that capability. Electricity grids embraced Tesla's technology, urban areas became more luminous, and industrial progress quickened. Tesla emerged victorious, but triumph carried a price. He achieved fame without security, and mankind had merely started to perceive the extent of his aspirations. Conquering the current conflict elevated Nikola Tesla to the status of a scientific star. Seemingly overnight, his AC networks energized metropolises, manufacturing sites, and street illumination. His moniker surfaced in print associated with terms like prodigy and seer. During public speaking events, Tesla captivated spectators with calibrated bolts, luminous bulbs, and devices that appeared to originate from a time yet to come. Electric power, previously unseen and intimidating, transformed into a spectacle with Tesla as its conjurer. For a fleeting interval, all factors converged. Tesla formed alliances with influential supporters, among them industrial magnates who grasped the worth of his creations. Revenue from patents streamed in, enabling him to reside in comfort, attire himself flawlessly, and navigate high society gatherings effortlessly. Lodging houses served as his abodes. Reporters asked for his insights not solely on electrical matters, but also on the destiny of humankind. However, underneath the exterior, insecurity was already brewing. Tesla lacked commercial savvy. He had an aversion to legal agreements, shunned bargaining, and placed faith in others too readily. As economic strain escalated among his associates, Tesla relinquished profitable patent fees of his own accord. Those payments could have positioned him among the richest individuals of that period. He held the conviction that concepts outweighed currency and presumed that acknowledgement would inevitably trail utility. That did not occur. With mounting renown came increasingly peculiar behavior. Tesla grew more ceremonial by the day. He shunned bodily interaction, established rigid schedules, and exhibited tendencies toward fixation. He labored in solitude, resting minimally, and consuming food with discrimination. As he retreated from private bonds, offers to social events multiplied yet closeness evaporated. His aspirations, too, extended past the realm of feasibility. Tesla ceased to be satisfied with merely refining electrical grids. He aimed to transform messaging, conveyance, and the very essence of power. He candidly discussed beaming electricity through the air worldwide, a concept that enthralled the populace but alarmed backers. From the perspective of moneylenders, Tesla was turning erratic. While contemporaries constructed enterprises centered on electrical power, Tesla pursued his fantasies. He expended funds liberally on trials, persuaded that triumph lay perpetually just a single discovery distant. Capital drained out more rapidly than it arrived. Initiatives stagnated, target dates drifted. Yet Tesla stayed self-assured. He trusted that society would ultimately align with his concepts. Where he miscalculated concerned the elements of time and forbearance. At the conclusion of this phase, Tesla remained renowned and respected, yet grew progressively detached. The bedrock of his achievements was built on delicate premises, that brilliance would reap compensation without effort and destiny would hold off for him. That scenario failed to materialize. The groundwork was laid for Tesla's most daring endeavor and the onset of his most severe decline. At the dawn of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla was obsessed by one notion: a planet interconnected without physical conductors. Not merely communications, but energy itself, conveyed via the atmosphere without cost, limitless, and accessible universally for Tesla. This was no figment of imagination. This represented the obvious subsequent phase in mankind's advancement. He foresaw a globe enveloped in imperceptible force, where data and electric current moved with the same ease as acoustic waves. Ocean vessels would steer through wireless transmissions. Fresh reports would propagate instantaneously, and urban centers would radiate without connectors. Within Tesla's imagination, tomorrow was already constructed, it merely required monetary backing. That capital materialized from affluent financiers captivated by radio transmission. With their sponsorship, Tesla initiated the erection of a colossal edifice on Long Island, the Wardenclyffe Tower, ascending like a metallic framework against the heavens. It was designed to serve as the focal point of an international power infrastructure. Subterranean tunnels plunged far into the ground, while nearby structures brimmed with coils and dynamos. Every aspect of this undertaking was outsized, exploratory, and costly. Initially, optimism was abundant, as wireless radio broadcasting started demonstrating potential, and Tesla anticipated that energy transmission would ensue. However, the venture promptly encountered obstacles. Expenditures swelled, outcomes faltered, and financiers became anxious. The fundamental issue extended beyond engineering. It was ideological. Tesla intended to distribute energy at no cost, whereas his sponsors sought financial gain. Once they grasped that Tesla's method could not be readily commercialized or regulated, interest shifted to doubt. Monetary support decelerated and eventually ceased. During this period, rivals attained tangible accomplishments. Many other innovators utilized more straightforward and cost-effective approaches to transmit radio, sharing their work publicly and launching profitable ventures. Tesla viewed them as unambitious imitators, convinced of his technology's superiority. From a technical angle, perhaps he was accurate, but in business, he was inconsequential. Work on his tower ground to a halt, leaving it an incomplete monument to unsupported ambition. Despite his refusal to give up, Tesla lacked the funds to proceed. Debtors pressed him, assets were liquidated, and the vision disintegrated silently, devoid of any fanfare. The setback was crushing for Tesla. Wardenclyffe represented more than a mere venture. It was validation of his entire perspective, and its downfall signified a crucial shift. Calls to investors went unreturned, newspapers moved on, and invitations ceased entirely. But Tesla didn't back down, he just turned within himself. Since the world refused to back his innovations, he'd continue to conceive them by himself. Eventually, the tower was demolished, its materials disposed of as scrap. All that was left was a bare plot and a query that persists even now. Did Tesla arrive too soon, or was he excessively idealistic for the globe he aimed to energize? Following Wardenclyffe's downfall, Tesla failed to reinvent his persona. Instead, he withdrew. The celebrated orator who once packed auditoriums gradually disappeared into hotel accommodations, journals, and increasingly eccentric daily habits. Tesla kept his mind perpetually active, yet society had stopped paying attention. Deprived of financial backers, his projects turned ever more hypothetical. He proclaimed innovations that were never truly shown: beams of death, equipment for earthquakes, energy arms that could stop hostilities. The media enjoyed the splashy headlines, but no longer regarded his assertions with sincerity. For many, Tesla evolved from a visionary into a novelty, a brilliant intellect adrift, unmoored from the real world. His practices became rigid rituals. He grew a severe phobia of microbes, scrubbing himself repeatedly and avoiding contact with items touched by anyone else. He insisted on exact figures, specifically multiples of 3 in his everyday routines. He completely shunned romantic ties, convinced that abstinence maintained sharpness of mind. The discipline these regulations previously afforded now contributed to his growing financial seclusion. Circumstances deteriorated. Tesla migrated among inns, using his charm to persuade managers to grant him credit. Relying on his name, he settled bills when possible and pledged future income when that wasn't feasible. Previous allies kept their distance, and fresh backers failed to materialize. The era had progressed toward large-scale manufacturing, industrial research labs, and collaborative efforts. Tesla stayed resolutely solitary, though his intellect remained ceaselessly active. He packed notebooks with sketches, formulas, and forecasts. A few were utterly unfeasible, yet others were disturbingly correct. He mentioned hand-sized gadgets for wireless interaction. He pictured worldwide data webs. He depicted remote-operated apparatuses many years before they actually materialized. These concepts largely escaped attention, concealed under his increasingly odd persona. Tesla's isolation intensified, yet so did his preference for concepts over human connections. He developed emotional attachments not with coworkers, but with creatures, particularly doves. He looked after wounded birds, nourished them every day, and mentioned one specific pigeon with special fondness. He asserted that this bird held more significance for him than any human connection ever had. From the outside, Tesla seemed sorrowful, even wretched, formerly celebrated, now overlooked, once affluent, now reliant on others. Yet such a superficial perspective overlooks a vital point. Tesla never thought that success was gauged by luxury or acclaim. He believed that the value of ideas outweighed their popularity. Though his renown diminished, the frameworks he had assisted in building kept growing. Urban centers shone more brightly, factories became noisier, and alternating current became ubiquitous. Tesla might have been fading from the public eye, yet the surrounding world continued to operate on his intellect. During his later years, Tesla inhabited a peculiar paradox. His reputation remained renowned, but his physical presence had turned spectral. He received invitations to birthdays, celebrations, and media interviews, not due to any ongoing sponsorship, but because he embodied a bygone era of solitary creators. While yet alive, Tesla had turned into a living landmark. His daily routine involved shifting among New York lodgings, especially the Hotel New Yorker, where his accommodations grew increasingly Spartan. His revenue derived from modest allowances, sporadic speaking honorariums, and the discreet assistance of admirers who believed the world had a debt to him. Indeed, it did, but such debts of acknowledgement are seldom settled promptly. Tesla proceeded to unveil innovations, frequently in birthday conversations with reporters. He mentioned directed energy arms, sophisticated propulsion, and novel modes of communication. Some audience members brushed aside his statements as fantasies of a senile intellect, while others discerned glimpses of ideas that current tech hadn't yet matched. Tesla ceased making efforts to physically demonstrate anything. His assurance now relied wholly on mental conviction. His rituals became even more rigorous. He trod identical paths, consumed identical dishes, and adhered to numerical sequences with relentless precision. any disturbance deeply perturbed him. These behaviors, formerly aids for concentration, now functioned as barriers separating him from society. Those who visited depicted him as courteous, lucid, yet aloof, perpetually speaking from a stance marginally detached from the current moment. Nevertheless, instants of clarity occasionally broke through the seclusion. Tesla completely realized that others received recognition for creations he had conceived. Years prior, he observed how radio, wireless command, and electrical networks developed precisely as he had foreseen. This understanding contained no resentment, merely calm resignation. Tesla was convinced that truth required no applause to be valid. As his physical condition deteriorated, his body grew frail, yet his intellect stayed acute. He put down deliberate, polished concepts until the very end. Tesla passed away alone in his hotel suite in January 1943. There was no assembly, no workshop, no spectacular concluding trial, only days of quiet. Authorities confiscated his documents, worried about potential contents. Rumors erupted immediately. Did Tesla construct classified arms? Had he uncovered energies too formidable to disclose? The truth was probably more straightforward and deeper. His journals brimmed with concepts that preceded their era, many incomplete, several unfeasible. Others awaited a future that could comprehend them. Tesla departed the world in silence, yet the structures he forged guaranteed the world would never again be still. For Tesla, death accomplished what life had never entirely achieved. It divorced the man from the clamor around him. When the sensational news subsided and the oddities were removed, what persisted was the framework of today's globe, silently resonating with his thoughts. Alternating current turned global, generating stations, transformers, and power lines all adhered to tenets that Tesla championed when few had faith in him. Urban areas grew both upwards and outwards, as electricity could be transmitted over great expanses. Work sites operated continuously, and residences illuminated after dark. All this would have been unattainable without Tesla's fundamental realization. Electricity needed to flow as an integrated network, not as a gimmick. One by one, the technologies Tesla had envisioned started to appear. Wireless communication transformed the globe, remote controls became commonplace, and radio signals saturated the atmosphere. Engineers encountered Tesla's earlier sketches from decades ago, which had become achievable thanks to contemporary materials and computers. His work was often not replicated, but rather rediscovered, and gradually, public opinion began to change. Tesla evolved from a forgotten eccentric to a misjudged trailblazer. His narrative was reshaped in literature, his publications were referenced by researchers, and his name was used by innovators as a representation of ingenuity. Free from traditional constraints, he turned into a cultural emblem, not due to a quest for celebrity, but because his tale serves as a cautionary lesson about what occurs when foresight exceeds institutional capabilities. Unlike his competitors, Tesla didn't construct an empire, he laid the groundwork. Many others gained financially from the systems he enabled. This disparity, initially seen as tragic, eventually became woven into his mythos. Tesla came to embody the notion that advancement doesn't always compensate its creators, yet they remain essential to it. His name started showing up all over, in research facilities, on statues, and within educational volumes. The Tesla became the official unit for magnetic flux density, securing his permanent place in the vocabulary of physics. His existence, previously characterized by seclusion, turned into a benchmark for those who followed. Tesla's enduring contribution isn't one specific creation. It's an entire methodology. He envisions entire systems prior to construction and relies on theory even when empirical proof is overdue. Tesla held the conviction that energy, data, and wisdom ought to circulate without hindrance. The irony is striking. He envisioned a planet fueled without cables, yet his most significant achievement is embedded in those very cables. These conduits transport alternating current throughout entire landmasses, electrifying the existence of strangers and illuminating metropolises he never visited. He passed away convinced that the world had left him behind. In reality, the world was still attempting to catch up. Nikola Tesla's story raises a troubling query. How should society treat individuals whose vision extends too far into the future? Tesla's downfall wasn't caused by a lack of intellect or hard work. It resulted from a disconnect between his inspiration and the structures intended to sustain it. He firmly believed that concepts ought to benefit humankind prior to generating income. This principle guided every critical choice he made, and came at a high price. Meanwhile, his contemporaries pursued patents relentlessly, established enterprises, and safeguarded their profits. Tesla relaxed his hold, relinquished ownership rights, disregarded legal agreements, and relied on the notion that practical value would ultimately garner backing. Historical evidence indicates that such support rarely materializes, and his tale uncovers a bitter reality. Advancement is frequently constructed by individuals who receive no compensation from it. Society favors incremental improvements over radical transformations, and stable profits over speculative breakthroughs. Tesla proposed giant strides, yet investors were looking for steady steps. However, it would be a mistake to view his existence solely as a tragedy. Tesla lived precisely on his own terms. He turned down compromise, predictability, and tradition, not out of ignorance, but because he declined to yield to them. He swapped ease for insight, security for opportunity, and popularity for principle. Ultimately, Tesla also serves as a reminder that progress doesn't follow a linear path. Concepts can emerge generations ahead of the technological instruments required to realize them. Being correct prematurely can appear indistinguishable from being erroneous. Tesla's aspirations for wireless transmission, disregarded during his era, continue to develop in the present day, though not precisely as he envisioned. Yet in essence, the solitude so frequently highlighted wasn't entirely forced upon him by society. He also deliberately embraced it. Tesla placed greater importance on concepts than on personal connections, on frameworks than on community, and on tomorrow than on today. This selection granted him tremendous concentration, as well as profound seclusion. Today's society frequently idealizes Tesla as a misjudged saint or a hidden prodigy, yet the truth is far more nuanced. He was intelligent, yet challenging, charitable, yet inflexible, farsighted, yet imperfect, and fundamentally human. What remains isn't the legend, it's the physical network. Whenever an urban area illuminates after sunset, whenever electrical energy traverses hundreds of kilometers without failing, Tesla's intellectual legacy is in action. His achievement wasn't accompanied by acclaim or riches. It brought lasting endurance. Tesla's story demonstrates that the future may not always compensate its creators, yet it is impossible to realize without them. Certain intellects are not intended to fit within their era. They are meant to reshape it. Occasionally, the value of an existence isn't gauged by its comfort but by the endurance of its concepts. Extended before maps became foldable or wall-mounted objects, they represented thought patterns. Early humans didn't start charting merely from inquisitiveness. They did so because becoming disoriented could prove lethal. A map wasn't concerned with precision, as we understand it today. Instead, it focused on recollection, endurance, and significance. The very first maps existed in the mind before they materialized on surfaces. Individuals committed to memory terrain features, celestial bodies, shorelines, cyclical weather patterns, and routes etched into the landscape by consistent usage. Information was preserved via narratives, melodies, and ceremonial practices. Proceed at the river's curve, halt prior to the red hill, set out when that star ascends. Territory was grasped via reiteration rather than quantification. Once humanity eventually started depicting the world, their aim wasn't imitation, it was explanation. Primitive maps highlighted that which held the greatest significance. Bodies of water were enlarged, hazardous areas were emphasized. Holy sites occupied the central position, scale was frequently unimportant, and significance reigned supreme. That's why old maps can seem odd to contemporary observers. Rivers flow in unimaginable paths, urban centers appear more prominent than peaks, and the heavens merge with the ground. These weren't errors, they were deliberate choices. A map functioned as an instrument, not a reflective surface. Cartography also represented an exertion of power. Giving a location a name was equivalent to asserting ownership. Delineating a border meant declaring dominance. Monarchs charted regions for taxation purposes, clerics charted the stars to divine destiny, and voyagers charted pathways to find their way back. Each map contained both influence and prejudice. Importantly, ancient societies didn't distinguish between physical space and temporal dimensions. A location changed its character according to the season, atmospheric conditions, or ceremonial schedule. A route visible during summer disappeared in winter, and a river crossing that was passable in one month turned perilous the following month. Maps possessed a fluid nature even when etched into rock or clay. The celestial realm was charted in conjunction with the terrestrial sphere. Celestial stars served as pathways, and constellations functioned as calendars. The heavens communicated to humanity the optimal moments for sowing, journeying, battling, or worshipping. Charting the world simultaneously meant charting the passage of time. In contrast to contemporary maps, ancient ones were seldom intended for unknown viewers. They operated on the premise of common understanding. You were already supposed to comprehend the territory. The chart merely reminded you of connections between locations, individuals, deities, and seasons. Fundamentally, cartography was an imaginative act. Rooted in experience, it posed a crucial query. Which parts of the world are significant enough to recall, prior to grids, before north indicators? Before scale diagrams, narratives were conveyed visually. Their goal wasn't to depict the world as it existed universally. Instead, they sought to represent it as it held relevance for its inhabitants. The oldest surviving physical charts originate from Mesopotamia, and they immediately reveal a significant insight. Cartography commenced in urban centers, not in the wild. Once humans settled permanently, territory became something to organize, partition, tax, and protect. The map emerged alongside administrative systems. Mesopotamian maps weren't created on paper. They were imprinted on clay tablets using the same cuneiform script employed for laws, records, and devotional texts. This immediately indicates how maps were perceived. They were documents, official artifacts, components of governance, not artistic works. The majority of Mesopotamian maps were small in scale and highly selective. They depicted irrigation channels, field limits, urban districts, and property boundaries. These were pragmatic records intended to settle conflicts, distribute land, and oversee resources in a terrain shaped by rivers that flooded without warning. When the landscape altered, the map gained significance. Yet Mesopotamia also produced something considerably more ambitious: charts of the entire world as they comprehended it. The most renowned instance is a Babylonian world map, frequently referred to as the Imago Mundi. On it, the city of Babylon is positioned firmly at the center. Surrounding it is a circular river, representing the known world, bordered by a cosmic ocean. Beyond that, triangular areas are marked as remote, hazardous, or unexplored. This wasn't lack of knowledge, it was a worldview. For the Babylonians, the world was structured around cultural and cosmic significance, not physical distance. Babylon was central because it was pivotal to meaning, authority, and divine blessing. The map mirrored a hierarchy, not exploration. Text and visuals collaborated. Written annotations clarified what illustrations alone couldn't convey. Mountains weren't depicted realistically. They were symbols, rivers were straightened, scale was unimportant. What counted was relationships. This city governs this waterway. This land belongs to this deity. This boundary indicates authority. Mesopotamian maps also merged geography with mythology. The world's edge wasn't merely remote. It was where mythical beings dwelled, where normal order collapsed. Charting the unknown meant acknowledging peril, not eliminating it, a crucial point. These charts weren't intended for travelers. They were meant for officials, priests, and sovereigns. Navigation still depended on experience and oral traditions. The map's purpose was conceptual. It defined how the world was organized, not how to journey through it. In Mesopotamia, cartography was an extension of administration and faith. To inscribe the world in clay, was to declare, "This is how reality is structured, and this is your place within it." In ancient Egypt, maps emerged from repetition. The terrain itself demanded accuracy. Annually, the Nile flooded, wiped out boundaries, then withdrew, leaving behind fertile soil and disorder. Fields vanished, property lines dissolved. For governance, Egyptians had to redraw the world repeatedly. Consequently, Egyptian mapping emphasized measurement over exploration. Surveyors, often working for the state or temples, re-established borders after each flood using ropes, sight lines, and geometry, thereby restoring order from chaos. Mapping was an act of restoration, a method to bring the land back to its proper equilibrium. Egyptian maps were frequently drawn on papyrus or engraved on stone walls. They depicted estates, channels, quarries, and roads not in perspective but in plan view. Objects were flattened and symbolized. A temple was shown not as it appeared, but as it functioned. A canal was a line of control, not a scenic element. Orientation mattered. South was often placed at the top of the map, reflecting the upstream direction of the Nile. North, linked with chaos and foreign territories, was positioned below. This alone reveals that Egyptian maps were moral documents as much as spatial ones. Direction conveyed significance. The Nile itself dominated Egyptian spatial thinking. It was the country's backbone, the axis around which everything else organized. East and West were defined relative to the Nile. Life, labor, and agriculture belonged to the East, where the sun rose. Death and the afterlife lay to the West, where the sun set. Maps distinctly and intentionally reflected this cosmic division. Egyptians also charted beyond the earth. Tomb walls and papyri included detailed diagrams of the afterlife, routes the soul would travel after death. These were not symbolic suggestions. They were practical guides, showing gates, obstacles, guardians, and paths that had to be correctly followed to reach eternity. Getting lost in the afterlife was as dangerous as getting lost in the desert. Astronomy directly fed into geography. Star charts aligned temples, celestial cycles regulated time, labor, and rituals. The sky was regarded as a second landscape, orderly and navigable just like the land below. In Egypt, cartography wasn't about discovering new domains, but about preserving balance in a world already known. To draw the land was to reaffirm cosmic order, a declaration that chaos had been pushed back for at least another year. In ancient Greece, cartography took a sharp turn toward abstraction and theory, unlike earlier cultures that mapped to manage land or affirm cosmic order. Greek thinkers posed a more unsettling question. What does the world actually look like? Greek maps were born in the company of philosophy. Thinkers debated not just where things were, but why they were there, and whether the earth itself had a shape that could be understood through pure reason alone. This was a radical shift. Space was no longer only experienced or inherited. It could be calculated. Early Greek maps were still rough, often placing the Mediterranean at the center and stretching unknown regions into vague edges. But the mindset behind them was new. Distance mattered, direction mattered, proportion mattered. A map was no longer just symbolic, it was an argument. One of the most important breakthroughs came from the idea that the Earth was spherical. This was not universally accepted at first, but it reshaped everything. If the world was round, then space could be measured systematically. Latitude and longitude were no longer fantasies, they were necessities. Greek scholars began combining travel reports, astronomical observation, and mathematics. By tracking the angle of the sun in different cities, they estimated distances across the globe. Coastlines were sketched based on sailors' accounts. Winds were categorized, and climate zones were theorized. Mapping the world also meant mapping humanity's place within it. Greeks divided the Earth into regions based on temperature and habitability. Some areas were thought too hot or too cold for civilization. These preconceptions influenced the Greek perception of foreign cultures, seeing them not as equivalent societies in distant lands, but rather as outcomes of their surroundings. Crucially, Greek cartography was seldom employed for navigational purposes. Mariners continued to depend on expertise, celestial bodies, and recollection. The Greek map was essentially an intellectual construct. It was designed to interpret the world, not to cross it. That explains why Greek maps frequently appear unfinished. Whole landmasses are absent or warped, yet their accomplishment resides within these constraints. They regarded the cosmos as comprehensible without direct observation of every segment. Logic could bridge voids where practical knowledge fell short. Hellenic cartography established the groundwork for subsequent schools of thought. It brought forward scale projection and the concept that geography could be a discipline as opposed to a compilation of regional facts. For the first time, a map was more than a spatial guide. It constituted a hypothesis about existence itself, rendered with lines, angles, and the conviction that the cosmos adhered to principles. People could comprehend that Greek maps were essentially theories. Roman cartography served practical purposes. Under the Roman Empire, map-making was divested of theoretical thought and refashioned for dominance. Rome had no requirement for an aerial view of the world. It required knowledge of marching speed across terrain. Roman mapping prioritized travel over geometry. The condition of roads took precedence over shoreline contours. Travel times mattered more than accurate scaling. A Roman map served more as a flat timetable than a spatial representation. The prime illustration is the Tabula Peutingeriana, an elongated, slender road chart depicting the empire as an extended horizontal band resembling a strip. Urban centers are marked as points. Roadways are depicted as linear routes. Oceans are condensed. Mountains are barely indicated. To a contemporary eye, it seems ridiculous. To a Roman bureaucrat, it was ideal. Such a cartographic piece addressed utilitarian queries. What is the distance between Rome and Alexandria? At which locations are rest stops situated? What is the duration of the journey in days? Where can fresh horses be acquired? Which places offer lodging, military posts, and provision stockpiles? Territorial knowledge transformed into logistical operations. Roman land measurers possessed great expertise, employing instruments such as the groma and chorobates. They constructed roadways with remarkable exactitude, frequently in straight alignments that still characterize present-day terrain. These data were integrated into cartographic products utilized by officials, fiscal agents, and military strategists. Cartography was intertwined with administration, in contrast to preceding civilizations. Rome pursued expansionist mapping. Military victory necessitated record-keeping. Territories were cataloged. Frontiers delineated. Assets documented. Any location absent from the map was not completely integrated into Rome. Constructing a road across terrain signified permanent annexation. Roman maps further cemented social structure. The city of Rome served as the immutable datum. All distances were calculated from the imperial center. Every route, both practically and metaphorically, converged there. The cartographic representation did not depict the realm as balanced territories. It illustrated a framework emanating from authority. Notably, Romans had scant inclination toward charting unexplored regions. Outside the frontiers existed barbaric peoples, disorder, and unimportance. The map terminated where sovereignty ceased. In contrast to Hellenic inquisitiveness or Mesopotamian worldviews, Roman cartography was sufficiently assured to disregard what it could not subjugate. For voyagers, these cartographic documents were seldom transported as tangible objects. Information was passed down verbally or via inscribed travel logs enumerating settlements and spans. The map operated covertly, molding the physical framework instead of directing single persons. Roman cartography converted territory into an appendage of power. Roadways functioned as circulatory channels, urban centers as junction points, travel distances became foreseeable. By means of maps, Rome not only traversed the planet, it arranged it, normalized it, and bound it collectively using ink, masonry, and regulation. Throughout the expansive Pacific, among societies devoid of script or cartographic paper, nautical expertise attained a degree of complexity that continues to amaze contemporary mariners. Within the Polynesian archipelago, cartography was not a visual object. It was an acquired practice. Committed to memory and perceived through the senses, Polynesian navigators traversed many thousands of kilometers of open sea well before the advent of compasses or sextants. They did not depend on documented maps in their canoes. Instead, they held mental charts composed of celestial bodies, ocean currents, air movements, avian life, and recollections. The sea itself constituted the cartographic medium. What foreigners subsequently termed stick charts served as instructional implements, not navigational aids, constructed from slender twigs bound with plant material. These diagrams depicted wave dynamics, island locations, and oceanic rises. Arched sticks indicated how waves curved and rebounded around terrestrial formations. Seashells or knots designated islands, yet these items were never transported onto the ocean. They were examined on shore, then abandoned for a Polynesian wayfinder. The sea possessed arrangement. Swells advanced in foreseeable cycles. Distinct wave configurations collided and produced discernible sequences. Land masses interfered with these rhythms in nuanced manners perceptible via the vessel's movement. Direction finding was haptic. The operator sensed location through feel. Celestial bodies held comparable significance. The nocturnal firmament was partitioned into trajectories, with particular stars ascending and descending in established orientations. A trip was arranged as a succession of stellar references, refined as the night advanced. When overcast conditions hid the heavens, wayfinders relied on wind vectors, cloud formations, marine avians, and even the hue of the ocean. This expertise was holy and exclusive. Seafaring skills were transmitted through extended mentoring periods, frequently among kinship lines. Errors proved lethal. There existed no allowance for inaccuracy in the wide sea. Hence, cartography was not theoretical, it was a physical ability. Duration and distance were indivisible. A path was not solely an orientation, but also a time span. Position was determined by elapsed travel period. In specific circumstances, recollection supplanted quantification and know-how superseded tools. Early European adventurers initially disregarded Polynesian seafaring as basic chance. Only subsequently did scholars understand its methodical nature. Polynesians were not speculating. They were interpreting an intricate, evolving cartography inscribed in the natural environment. These mental representations contest contemporary presumptions. They demonstrate that precise geographical comprehension does not demand paper, numerals, or ratio. It demands focus, discipline, and profound harmony with the surroundings. In Polynesia, the cartographic representation was not a material item. It constituted an association between the wayfinder and the sea, the heavens and the boat, former voyages and current movement. Territory was not delineated. It was experienced. Concurrently, as the Mediterranean civilizations discussed mathematics and dominion, ancient Asian cultures nurtured mapping traditions influenced by governance, ideology, and universal structure. In both classical China and classical India, cartographic creations were less concerned with discovery and more with balance, synchronizing human territory with ethical and ecological principles. In China, map-making arose from administrative needs as nascent territories grew. Monarchs required knowledge of the locations of thoroughfares, watercourses, agricultural zones, and frontiers. Maps were crafted on silk, bamboo, and timber. Frequently, along with thorough textual annotations, precision was significant but not in seclusion. A high-quality map additionally manifested structure. Waterways ran correctly, peaks occupied their appropriate positions, and expanse echoed social ranking. Chinese cartographic works frequently employed lattice frameworks well before such systems emerged in other regions. This enabled travel spans to be calculated uniformly and territories to be contrasted. However, these grids were not impartial. The imperial seat was situated close to the middle, strengthening political pull. Marginal areas were depicted as diminished or lacking detail, mirroring their lower rank in the hierarchy. Importantly, Chinese cartography connected physical terrain with cosmic order. The terrain was molded by qi, the life force that streams through peaks and rivers. Charts assisted in identifying favorable locations for urban centers, burial grounds, and places of worship. Decisions on construction sites were not merely utilitarian, they carried moral and universal significance. Cartography served as an instrument to keep harmony among the skies, the land, and people. In Old India, mapmaking had a distinct shape. Tangible charts were utilized mainly for land allocations and governance, yet most geographical knowledge was kept in written works. The globe was portrayed using stratified zones, ring-like landmasses, and holy poles. At the universe's heart stood Mount Meru, encircled by seas and territories organized in a symbolic pattern. These weren't mistakes in wayfinding. They represented philosophical diagrams. Indian worldviews saw space as bound together with ethical and spiritual evolution. Paths for religious journeys held greater significance than government frontiers, and holy waterways were charted via poetry and ceremonies. Recollection, instead of writing, celestial observation once more took a key part. Time charts, stellar trails, and orbits of planets influenced perceptions of area. Temporal and physical dimensions converged. Locating oneself also required understanding one's place in cycles of reincarnation, responsibilities, and ceremonial duties. Contrary to Roman or Hellenic customs, Asian cartography didn't aim to dominate territory through thought or force. It aimed to properly position people inside it. Charts served as manuals for conduct, just as for travel. Those heritages indicate that cartography is never purely mechanical. Each diagram mirrors beliefs. In China and India, the key belief was equilibrium between the sovereign and territory, human and universe, deed and moderation. Existence wasn't to be controlled, it was to be harmonized with, and maps demonstrated the way. Numerous antique charts weren't intended to direct steps or vessels. Several were intended to direct existences through various old civilizations. Cartography went past earth and water into chronology, destiny, and the cosmos. Such diagrams didn't indicate where one was headed. They indicated when and for what reason. Celestial charts were among the most accurate constructions of antiquity. Sky diagrams monitored the motions of star patterns, wandering stars, and the sun throughout yearly cycles. In Mesopotamia, holy men charted the heavens to forecast signs, while in Egypt, stars oriented burial chambers and shrines. In China, cosmic drawings reflected government hierarchy, with celestial administrators overseeing terrestrial ones. Charting the heavens was a method to comprehend structure itself. Such diagrams were extremely functional, and farming schedules relied on them when a star appeared at daybreak. It indicated sowing or reaping when a constellation vanished, and it forewarned of inundations or aridity. Chronology wasn't theoretical, it was geometric, inscribed throughout the firmament. Holy charts also steered spirits. Within Egypt, intricate diagrams of the netherworld depicted the spirit's voyage beyond demise, portals, arbiters, perils, and routes to everlastingness. These weren't figurative but directives. Understanding the chart meant enduring the realm beyond. In Mesoamerica, timetables served as charts of fate. Each day possessed orientations, hues, deities, and significances, while time progressed through area in cycles, not straight lines. Not in a straight fashion, being born on a given date located you at a particular spot on a universal diagram. That influenced your destiny. Location, moment, and selfhood fused. Even urban centers were plotted emblematically. Numerous old seats of power were arranged as celestial patterns. Roadways were oriented with solstice points. Royal buildings indicated the middle of existence, and sanctuaries embodied peaks or celestial bodies. Dwelling inside the metropolis meant dwelling within a chart, one that perpetually emphasized how the cosmos was structured. Those unseen charts were frequently more critical than tangible ones. A wanderer might become disoriented and find direction again, but a spirit that misplaced its route couldn't. An agriculturist who disregarded the almanac went hungry, and a sovereign who governed out of sync forfeited authority. Contemporary diagrams detach location from significance. Old charts seldom did. To chart an item was to clarify its function within a greater framework. The query wasn't, where does this lie, but to what does this pertain? Through charting the firmament, chronology, and destiny, old populations converted unpredictability into form. They couldn't regulate inundations, demise, or the celestial bodies, yet they could position them on a diagram and impose arrangement. By that action, they turned the unfamiliar into something manageable, not by walking but through faith, tradition, and recollection. When examined collectively, antique charts expose much beyond shores or paths. They expose how human beings reason when confronting ambiguity. Cartography never solely concerned area. It dealt with significance, authority, recollection, and persistence. Each old society charted its highest priorities. Mesopotamians drew irrigation channels and settlements because moisture and governance sustained their existence. Egyptians traced the Nile and the beyond because structure and perpetuity characterized their realm. Hellenes charted conceptual territory as they had faith in logic. Romans charted highways because mobility maintained their dominion. Pacific Islanders charted swells and celestial bodies because the sea required it. No diagram is impartial. Anyone is a declaration. Old charts also demonstrate that people don't perceive area uniformly. We amplify what holds importance and minimize what doesn't. Holy sites expand, hazardous territories stand out, the recognizable becomes pivotal, and the mysterious is shunted to the periphery or populated with fables. This isn't mistake, it's reasoning. Contemporary diagrams strive for impartiality, yet still today selections persist. Which items receive labels, which get boundaries, what is positioned centrally. Old charts render those selections noticeable. They don't conceal viewpoint, they broadcast it. Cartography also uncovers a profound human urge to transform encounter into pattern, to tread a route once is recollection, to sketch it is endurance, to instruct it is tradition. Diagrams permitted understanding to persist beyond single lifespans, to transfer throughout ages, to survive those who initially traverse the terrain. Maybe crucially, old charts prompt us that mankind has always dwelled in numerous realms simultaneously. Tangible terrains, social rankings, holy worldviews, chronological rotations. A chart could display one or every facet based on what the society required. We frequently evaluate antique charts through current norms and deem them imprecise, yet precision was never the aim. Utility was key. A diagram that directed endurance, ceremony, or selfhood was effective irrespective of proportion or perspective. In that regard, old charts were profoundly human. They merged scrutiny with fantasy, exactness with conviction. They recognized that existence is excessively intricate to record entirely, so we pick what's vital and sketch that. Even presently, when orbital devices can capture every sector of the globe, we still chart selectively, we still make ourselves the midpoint, we still narrate tales through area. Old charts remind us that cartography isn't solely about knowing one's location. It concerns knowing one's identity and how one thinks the cosmos is intended to be comprehended.